Work or nursing home, pick one, Dad. That's exactly what my son David told me. He said it with such cold indifference, like he was choosing between coffee or tea. I looked at him and smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who understood everything. I stood up, walked into my room, and made one phone call. 20 minutes later, when a man stepped through my front door, my son would learn the truth about the father he had just thrown away. That phone call I made, it's about to turn David's world upside down. But before the truth comes out, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. You're going to want to see his reaction. Look, Dad, this isn't working out anymore. You're 67, you don't bring in any income, and frankly, we can't keep supporting you like this. So here's the deal. Either you find yourself a job by the end of this week, or we're going to have to look into getting you a spot at one of those nursing homes. Your choice. My son David delivered those words like he was discussing the weather forecast. Cold, matter of fact, final. He stood in the doorway of what used to be my bedroom, his wife Ashley right behind him with that satisfied smirk she wore whenever she got her way. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, the same bed I'd been sleeping in for 2 years since they graciously offered me their spare room. The morning light coming through the cheap curtains made everything look washed out, including the relationship I thought I had with my only child. We've been more than patient, Ashley chimed in, her voice dripping with fake concern, but we have our own future to think about, Olivia's college fund, the mortgage, our retirement. We just can't afford another mouth to feed indefinitely. Another mouth to feed, like I was some stray dog they'd taken pity on. David nodded, warming up to his speech. And before you start with the guilt trip about raising me alone after Mom died, that was your job as a parent. I don't owe you anything for doing what you were supposed to do. I looked at this man who shared my blood, my name, and wondered when his heart had turned to stone. This was the same boy who used to beg me for bedtime stories, who cried when his goldfish died, who promised he'd take care of me when I got old. Sunset Manor has an opening, Ashley added helpfully. It's not that expensive, and your Social Security should cover most of it. Sunset Manor, I'd driven past that place plenty of times, seen the empty faces pressed against windows, watching life happen without them. So, what's it going to be? David crossed his arms. Job hunting or house hunting? I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 67 years in my bones, but underneath that weariness was something else, something they couldn't see, couldn't understand, and had never bothered to discover. I hear you loud and clear, I said quietly. That seemed to satisfy them. David's shoulders relaxed like he'd just finished an unpleasant chore. Good, glad we understand each other. They walked out together, David's hand on Ashley's back, leaving me alone with the silence and the smell of their breakfast cooking downstairs. Breakfast I apparently wasn't invited to share. I pulled my old leather suitcase from the closet, the same one I'd carried when I first arrived in Wyoming 30 years ago. Still sturdy, still reliable, like me, it had more life left than people gave it credit for. As I folded my work clothes, my mind drifted back through the decades, all those early mornings, all those long days, all that time I'd spent building something they knew absolutely nothing about. David saw a broken-down old man with calloused hands and dirt under his fingernails. If he only knew what those hands had built. I reached for my flip phone and dialed a number I had memorized long ago. Thomas, I said when the familiar voice answered. It's time, come get me. You sure about this, sir? Never been more sure of anything in my life. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I continued packing, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood waking up outside, normal people starting normal days, none of them knowing that everything was about to change. Then I heard it, a deep, powerful rumble growing steadily louder, the unmistakable sound of serious machinery heading this way. From downstairs, I heard David and Ashley's conversation stop mid-sentence. Footsteps rushed toward the front window. I zipped up my suitcase and smiled. Time to show them who they'd just thrown away. As I reached for my old steel-toed work boots, memories flooded back. These scuffed companions held secrets David never bothered to discover. But let me tell you folks the real truth about my son and the test I've been running for 30 years. 1994, I was 37, staring at 50 acres of worthless Wyoming land. The real estate agent shook his head. No utilities, no road access, Mr. Harris, just dirt and dreams. I grabbed a handful of that soil. Sometimes the best things are hidden where nobody expects them. That was the beginning. Year after year, I added more land. 20 acres here, 40 there. Worked 3 jobs, construction days, security nights, lumberyard weekends. Every extra dollar went into expanding what would become something magnificent. By 2010, I owned 500 acres of prime ranch land, cattle, horses, a main house that belonged in magazines. The Harris Ranch was worth more than most folks in Jackson Hole would see in 3 lifetimes. But here's the thing, I kept it completely secret. Why? Because I wanted to test my son's character. David was 9 when I started building, bright kid who promised, "Dad, when I'm rich, I'll buy you a big house. Just be a good man's son," I'd tell him. That's worth more than money. At 18, he couldn't wait to escape. "I'm done with this small-town life. I want more than working with my hands like some laborer." That stung, but I kept building, kept hoping he'd learn what really mattered. For 15 years, David chased his corporate dreams in Denver, called twice a year, usually needing money. I'd send what I could for my construction wages, never mentioning I could write him a check for 100 times that amount. 2 years ago, his world collapsed, startup failed, lost their condo, credit destroyed. At 37, he came crawling back. "Dad, could we stay here just until we get back on our feet?" I opened my door immediately. "This is your home, son." Here was my chance. If David had learned humility, if he'd gained respect for simple values, for family over money, then I'd reveal everything, share the legacy I'd built for him. Instead, I got the ultimatum you just heard. Within a month, they'd moved me to the smallest room. Ashley treated me like unwelcome furniture. David acted like I was a burden he was graciously carrying. For 2 years, I watched him choose pride over gratitude, entitlement over respect. The final test was this morning's demand, work or nursing home. He failed spectacularly. The rumble outside was now right at our front door. I could hear David's confused footsteps, Ashley's sharp questions echoing from downstairs. I smiled as my suitcase clicked shut. Time to show them what they'd just thrown away and what true character looks like. The gleaming black Mercedes-Benz S-Class rolled through the neighborhood like it owned the place, which in a way it did. Chrome bumpers caught the morning sun, tinted windows reflecting the modest houses that suddenly looked shabby by comparison. This wasn't the kind of vehicle that belonged on Maple Street. I heard the front door slam downstairs, followed by David's voice, high and tight with confusion. "What the hell is that thing doing here?" Through my bedroom window, I watched my son and daughter-in-law rush onto the front porch, their morning coffee forgotten. Ashley clutched her bathrobe closed, squinting at the luxury sedan like it might bite her. David stood with his hands on his hips, trying to look authoritative, but mostly managing to look lost. The Mercedes came to a stop with a kind of quiet precision that only comes from German engineering and serious money. For a moment, nothing happened. The engine idled with a barely audible purr while David and Ashley exchanged worried glances. Then the driver's door opened. Thomas stepped out like he'd done this 1,000 times before. 52 years old, wearing a crisp white shirt, dark slacks, and boots that had seen honest work but were polished to perfection. His gray hair was neat, his posture straight, and when he looked toward the house, there was something in his bearing that commanded respect. "Excuse me," David called out, his voice cracking slightly. "Can I help you?" Thomas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked around to the passenger side of the Mercedes and stood there, hands clasped behind his back, waiting. That's when I made my entrance. I walked down those stairs with my head high and my old leather suitcase in hand, feeling more like myself than I had in 2 years. Each step was deliberate, unhurried, a man with somewhere important to be. David's jaw dropped when he saw me. "Dad, what are you doing? Where are you going with that suitcase?" I paused on the front porch, looking at my son and his wife, 2 people who just told me I was worthless, who'd given me an ultimatum like I was some kind of burden they'd graciously carried long enough. "Well," I said, my voice calm as Wyoming morning air, "you wanted me to find work, didn't you?" "Dad, I didn't mean—" "Thomas," I called to the man by the Mercedes, cutting David off mid-sentence. "Yes, sir, Mr. Harris," Thomas replied, and I caught the sharp intake of breath from Ashley at the respectful tone. I walked past David and Ashley without another word, my boots clicking on the concrete walkway. Behind me, I could hear my son's desperate voice. "Wait, who is this guy, Dad? What's going on? Where do you even know him from?" Thomas opened the rear door of the Mercedes with a slight bow of his head. The leather interior was immaculate, the kind of luxury David had always dreamed about but never quite achieved. "Sir," Thomas said, gesturing toward the open door. I turned back one last time. David was standing on the porch with his mouth hanging open, Ashley beside him looking like she'd seen a ghost. Neighbors were peeking out from behind curtains, drawn by the commotion and the expensive car that didn't belong in their world. "You said I needed to find work," I repeated, settling my suitcase on the seat. "Well, I've got work to do." As I climbed into the Mercedes, I heard David's voice rise to near panic. "Dad, wait! Who is this man? How do you know him? Where are you going?" Thomas closed the door with a solid thunk that sealed out David's increasingly frantic questions. Through the tinted window, I watched my son run toward the car, Ashley close behind, both of them looking like their world had just tilted sideways. Thomas got behind the wheel, adjusted his mirrors, and looked at me in the rear view. "Ready, sir." "I've been ready for 30 years, Thomas." As we pulled away from the curb, I saw David in the side mirror, standing in the middle of the street in his pajamas, watching the Mercedes disappear around the corner. Let him wonder, let him think, let him realize that maybe, just maybe, he didn't know his father as well as he thought he did. The leather seat embraced me like an old friend as Thomas navigated through the neighborhood streets. Behind us, I could see David sprinting back toward his house, probably to grab his keys. Ashley was already ahead of him, her silk robe flying as she rushed to their beat-up Honda. "Sir," Thomas said quietly, glancing in the rearview mirror, "it appears we're about to have company." Sure enough, David's car came roaring up behind us, weaving slightly as he struggled to catch up while probably trying to call someone at the same time. I could picture his face, that same desperate expression he'd worn as a kid when he realized he'd been caught in a lie. We'd barely reached the main highway when David pulled alongside us, gesturing frantically for us to stop. His window was down, his hair wild from the wind. "Dad, pull over, we need to talk." Thomas maintained his steady speed, professional as always. "Instructions, sir?" "Keep driving, let him follow." David fell back, then sped up again, this time managing to get slightly ahead of us before swerving into our lane. Thomas smoothly changed lanes, never losing his calm. "Quite persistent, isn't he?" Thomas observed. "He gets that from his mother." Finally, David gave up the dangerous highway maneuvers and settled for following at a distance. I could see Ashley in the passenger seat, her phone pressed to her ear, probably trying to figure out who Thomas was or what kind of car we were driving. 20 minutes later, we turned off the main highway onto a private road. David's Honda stayed right behind us, close enough that I could see his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Almost home, sir," Thomas said. Home, the word felt good rolling around in my mind. Not David's spare bedroom with its thin walls and thinner welcome, not the nursing home Ashley had probably already researched. Home. The road curved through a stand of aspens, their leaves catching the morning light like scattered gold coins. Beyond them, the landscape opened up into something David had never seen before, something he'd never bothered to ask about during all those years of taking my construction wages for granted. "My God!" I heard David's voice through his open window as we crested the small hill. Before us stretched 500 acres of the finest ranch land in Wyoming. Green pastures rolled toward the mountains like a carpet designed by nature herself. Black Angus cattle dotted the fields, their coats gleaming in the sunshine. A pristine white fence ran along the road, leading to an entrance that took David's breath away. The gate stood 12 feet high, crafted from wrought iron and local stone. Above them, spelled out in elegant metalwork, were the words, "Harris Ranch, established 1994. David's Honda came to a complete stop behind us. "Sir?" Thomas asked, his hand hovering over the gate remote. I rolled down my window and looked back at my son's car. Through the windshield, I could see David's face, pale, confused, his mouth moving as he tried to process what he was seeing. Ashley was leaning forward, her eyes wide, probably calculating property values in her head. "You know what, Thomas? Stop here for a moment." Thomas brought the Mercedes to a smooth halt just in front of the gates. I got out of the car, straightening my shirt, and walked back toward David's Honda. David rolled down his window, his voice barely a whisper. "Dad, what is this place?" "This," I said, gesturing toward the gates, "is what I built while you were busy telling me I was worthless." "But how? I don't understand." 30 years, son. Every morning I left before dawn, every night I came home covered in dust. You thought I was just some broken-down construction worker." I paused, letting that sink in. "Harris Ranch, 500 acres, my name on the deed." Ashley finally found her voice. "This is impossible. I lived in your spare room because I wanted to see what kind of man my son had become." I looked directly at David. "Now I know." Thomas had gotten out of the Mercedes and was standing respectfully nearby, waiting for instructions. "Thomas," I called, "open the gates." "Yes, sir, Mr. Harris." The massive gates swung open silently, revealing a paved drive that curved toward a main house that belonged in Architectural Digest. I walked back toward the Mercedes, then turned one final time toward David's stunned face. "You wanted me to find work, son?" "Well, I've got a ranch to run." 3 days of sleepless nights showed on David's face as his Honda approached the Harris Ranch gates. I watched from the porch as he sat there, probably rehearsing his speech. "Shall I send him away, sir?" Thomas appeared beside me. "Let's hear what he has to say." David's car crept up the driveway like he was entering foreign territory. I'd spent these 3 days reacquainting myself with my real home. Morning coffee on the wraparound porch, evening walks through pastures I'd dreamed about for decades. David parked and climbed out with Ashley, both gawking like tourists. The main house rose before them, 3 stories of native stone and timber that belonged in magazines. "Dad," David called, his voice carrying unfamiliar humility, "thank you for seeing us." I stayed on the porch, making him come to me. Thomas positioned himself nearby. "Yeah, I owe you a massive apology," David said, climbing the steps. "I was completely wrong about everything." Ashley hung back, her calculating eyes studying the hand-carved railings, the custom stonework, the solar panels glinting on distant barns. "Go on," I said. "All these years, I thought you were just—" He gestured helplessly at the prize Angus grazing nearby, the John Deere equipment lined up like soldiers. "I had no idea you'd built something so incredible. This place must be worth millions." There it was, not pride in my accomplishment, just the bottom line. "Money isn't everything, son." "Of course not, that's not what I meant." But his eyes kept wandering to the cattle, the equipment, the obvious wealth surrounding us. Ashley finally approached, having finished her mental property assessment. "William, this is absolutely stunning. I had no idea you were so accomplished." "What I'm trying to say," David rushed on, "is I want to make things right, be the son you deserve." "And what would that look like?" "Maybe Olivia could visit sometimes, get to know her grandfather, learn about ranch life. This would be amazing for a kid." I studied his face. 3 days ago, nursing home. Today, grandfather visitation rights. The transformation was remarkable and completely transparent. "Supervised visits," I said carefully. "Short ones." "Whatever you think is best." David's relief was obvious. "You know what's right for her." Thomas cleared his throat. "Mr. Harris, I need to check the south pasture." "Go ahead." David watched Thomas walk toward a pristine Ford F-350. "How many people work here?" "Enough." "And the land extends how far?" "Far enough." Frustration flickered behind David's forced smile. He wanted numbers, details, financial projections. "Actually," Ashley said suddenly, "we were wondering if Olivia could stay for a few days. This week, David has some job interviews in Denver, and I have that conference in Salt Lake City." My heart jumped, but I kept my expression neutral. "A few days, just while we're both traveling. She'd love it here, and honestly, we could use some time to sort things out." David's eagerness was barely contained. I looked at these 2 people who had just discovered their meal ticket and were already figuring out how to cash it in. "All right, bring her tomorrow." "We should head back," Ashley said, checking her phone. "Let you get back to your ranch management." They walked to their Honda in silence, but urgent whispers carried as they reached the car. "Did you see those cattle? Championship bloodlines. The equipment alone has to be worth. We need to play this smart, David." As they drove toward the gates, Ashley's voice drifted through David's open window. "We need to get control of this place, and that little girl is our way in." I smiled grimly and headed inside. Let the games begin. 1 week later, David sat hunched over his kitchen table like a man plotting war. Empty coffee cups and crumpled papers littered the surface, evidence of sleepless nights spent wrestling with a problem that had consumed his every waking thought. "We can't just let him sit on all that wealth," he muttered, running his hands through unwashed hair. "That ranch should be ours. I'm his only son, his only family." Ashley paced behind him, her silk robe swishing with each calculated step. She'd been the architect of this conversation from the moment they'd left Harris Ranch, planting seeds of resentment that had grown into full-blown obsession. "Your father humiliated us, David, made us look like fools in front of the neighbors, and now he's living like some kind of king while we're stuck in this." She gestured dismissively at their modest surroundings. "But what can we do? He owns everything legally, built it with his own money." Ashley stopped pacing, a cold smile spreading across her perfectly made-up face. "There's always a way, darling, we just need to be creative." The next morning found them in the sterile office of Richard Evans, a lawyer whose reputation for bending ethics had made him wealthy and despised in equal measure. Evans listened to their story with the practiced attention of a man who'd heard every sob story in the book. "So, let me understand this correctly," Evans said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Your elderly father has been, what's the phrase you used? Manipulating your daughter." "Exactly," Ashley jumped in. "He's been filling Olivia's head with ideas about ranch life, making her think she belongs there instead of with her real family." David shifted uncomfortably. "I mean, Olivia does seem to enjoy visiting." "That's exactly the problem," Ashley's voice rose. "Don't you see? He's using her emotional attachment to drive a wedge between us. It's textbook manipulation." Evans made notes on a yellow legal pad, his pen scratching like a spider spinning its web. "And you believe this constitutes unlawful detention?" "Think about it," Ashley continued, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality. "An elderly man, living alone on an isolated property, convincing a young child that she's better off with him than her parents. When we try to bring her home, she cries and begs to stay. That's not normal grandparent affection, that's coercion." David stared at his wife, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. The way she twisted every innocent moment between Olivia and her grandfather into something sinister, the calculated precision with which she built their case. "What exactly are you suggesting?" David asked quietly. Evans set down his pen and steepled his fingers. "Unlawful detention of a minor, emotional manipulation, possibly elder abuse charges if we can demonstrate that your father's judgment is compromised." "Elder abuse?" David's voice cracked. "Think about it," Evans continued smoothly. "A man his age, living alone on such a large property, making impulsive decisions like cutting off his family. We could argue diminished capacity, unsafe living conditions for a child." Ashley leaned forward eagerly. "What would we need to prove it?" "Witness statements, documentation of erratic behavior, evidence that the child is being held against her parents' wishes." Evans's smile was reptilian. "I can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow." That evening, David sat in his living room, staring at the legal documents Evans had prepared. The words swam before his eyes: unlawful detention, child endangerment, unfit guardian. "You're having second thoughts," Ashley observed from the doorway. "He's my father, Ash. These charges could destroy him." "He destroyed us first," she sat beside him, her voice soft and poisonous. "Do you think he cared about destroying our dignity when he let us grovel in front of the neighbors? Do you think he cared about our future when he kept his fortune secret all these years?" David looked at the papers again. His father's name appeared dozens of times, each mention another nail in the coffin they were building. "Olivia loves him," he whispered. "Olivia is 8 years old. She doesn't understand what's best for her." Ashley's hand found his shoulder, her touch cold despite its gentleness. "We're her parents, David. We decide what's best." The next morning, David stood outside the courthouse with a manila envelope in his sweating palms. Inside were sworn statements, legal documents, and a narrative that painted his father as a dangerous manipulator preying on a child's innocence. "Are you sure about this?" he asked one final time. Ashley's smile was triumphant. "We file this morning. His little game ends today." What started as a few days had stretched into 2 weeks, and I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Olivia's laughter echoed across the Harris Ranch pastures like music I'd forgotten existed. "Grandpa William, look how fast I can run," she called, pigtails bouncing as she chased a wandering calf. When David and Ashley had dropped her off, they'd said, "A few days while we handle business." They'd call occasionally to check in, asking how she was doing, but never mentioning when they'd pick her up, and every time Olivia got on the phone, she'd beg, "Please, Daddy, can I stay longer? Grandpa's teaching me to ride." David would always chuckle and say, "If your grandpa doesn't mind the company." Olivia took to ranch life like she was born for it, feeding chickens at dawn, brushing horses, helping Thomas check cattle. Her fearless spirit reminded me of David at that age, back when he still had wonder in his eyes. "Can we practice riding again?" she asked, breathless from her impromptu race. "After lunch, Thomas will teach you about horse hooves." "Really? That's so cool." Thomas appeared, leading Buttercup, our gentlest mare. "Ready for your lesson, Miss Olivia?" She scrambled onto the fence rail, completely comfortable around 1,000-pound animals. No fear, just pure joy. That's when I heard the vehicles. 2 police cruisers came up the drive, instantly changing our peaceful afternoon. Olivia noticed, her smile fading. "Grandpa, why are police here?" "Stay with Thomas, sweetheart." Officer Martinez approached, professional. "Mr. Harris, we need to discuss allegations that have been filed." "What allegations?" "Unlawful detention of a minor. A complaint states you're keeping your granddaughter against her parents' wishes." The words hit like a punch. Now I understood why. They'd been setting their trap, letting Olivia get attached so they could later claim I was holding her against their will. Olivia walked over, confused. "What's detention mean?" Officer Martinez knelt to her level. "Hi, honey, can you tell me how you feel about being here?" "I love it here," Olivia's response was immediate. "Grandpa teaches me about horses and cows. Thomas showed me egg collecting. We make pancakes every morning." "And did your grandpa ever say you couldn't go home?" Olivia's eyes widened. "No, Grandpa said I could call Mommy and Daddy any time, but I like it here better." My heart swelled with pride and broke simultaneously. This innocent child was being weaponized against me. "The complaint alleges 2 weeks without parental contact," Martinez said. "That's false. I have text messages and call logs proving regular contact. She talks to them every few days." Thomas stepped forward. "Officer, I've been here every day. This little girl is the happiest I've ever seen her. She talks about her parents but genuinely loves being here." "I don't want to go home yet," Olivia said, voice small. "Can't I stay longer?" Martinez looked between Olivia's pleading face and my bewildered expression, clearly trying to reconcile the complaint with reality. "Sir, I see she's well cared for and happy, but we must investigate allegations of emotional manipulation and unsafe conditions thoroughly." "Unsafe?" I gestured around the pristine ranch. "Look at this place. Look at her." Olivia grabbed my hand. "Grandpa didn't do anything wrong. He's the best grandpa ever." Tears formed in her eyes. Martinez sighed. "Mr. Harris, you need to come for questioning. Standard procedure." "What about Olivia?" "Child Services will speak with her separately. We'll contact her parents immediately." Looking down at Olivia's frightened face, I realized the full scope of David and Ashley's strategy. Use their own daughter as bait, then cry kidnapping when she didn't want to leave. "Grandpa," Olivia whispered, "did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart. You did everything right." But as Martinez gestured toward the patrol car, I knew the real fight was just beginning. 2 months later, I stood on the courthouse steps with justice finally within reach. The legal battle had been ugly, but today would end it. Inside, David and Ashley sat with their lawyer, looking like defendants in their own trial. The evidence had mounted against them. Text messages proving they'd asked me to keep Olivia, phone records showing regular contact, and financial documents revealing their sudden interest in my estate after discovering the ranch. Judge Patricia Coleman had seen family greed disguised as concern before. She'd listened to 2 months of testimony with the patience of someone who understood truth usually lay between accusations and denials. Olivia had been the star witness, speaking with 8-year-old clarity about where she belonged. When Judge Coleman asked directly, "Olivia, where do you want to live?" her answer came without hesitation. "With Grandpa William on the ranch. That's my home." David had broken down then, not from losing the case, but from finally seeing what he'd become, a man willing to use his daughter as a weapon against the father who'd given him everything. "All rise," the bailiff called for the final ruling. After reviewing all evidence, Judge Coleman began, "This court finds no evidence of coercion, manipulation, or unlawful detention. The child has clearly expressed her preferences and has been well cared for and genuinely happy in her grandfather's custody." Olivia squeezed my hand. "Furthermore, this court is troubled by evidence suggesting the complainant's motives were driven by financial considerations discovered only after learning of the defendant's assets, not the child's best interests." Ashley went white. David stared at the floor. "Custody is hereby awarded to William Harris, with supervised visitation rights to the biological parents." The gavel fell like thunder. It was over. 6 months later, I watched David split firewood behind the main house, his soft hands now calloused from honest work. Ashley had left 2 weeks after the trial, disappearing back to whatever hole she'd crawled from. "Dad," David had said that first day he'd shown up, asking for work, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to learn how to be the man you tried to raise." It was a start. Olivia came running across the pasture, school backpack bouncing. At 9 now, she moved through the ranch like she owned it, which, according to my updated will, she would someday. "Grandpa, Daddy, look what I drew." She held up a crayon drawing of our family, 3 generations standing in front of the ranch house, all smiling under a bright yellow sun. David wiped sweat from his forehead and grinned. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." "It's us," Olivia said proudly, "our real family." As sunset painted the Harris Ranch golden that evening, I sat on the porch, watching David teach Olivia to whittle, the same skill I'd tried teaching him 30 years ago. Some lessons take longer to learn, but they're worth the wait. Thomas appeared with 3 glasses of lemonade. "Beautiful evening, sir." "Yes, it is." Family isn't just about blood, it's about love, respect, and choosing to stand by each other when times get tough. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get a second chance to get it right. What do you think makes a real family? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the values that truly matter. You know, folks, after everything I've been through, I've learned that God has a way of testing us when we least expect it. Sometimes He strips away everything we think we know about the people we love, just to show us what really matters. When David told me to choose between work and a nursing home, I thought my world was ending, but God had other plans. He'd been preparing me for 30 years, building not just a ranch, but the strength to stand up for what's right. These grandpa stories aren't just about family drama, they're about discovering that real wealth isn't measured in acres or cattle, but in the love and respect we earn from those who truly know us. Olivia taught me that true story moments happen when we choose courage over comfort. At 8 years old, she had the wisdom to see through her parents' greed and choose genuine love over empty promises. God blessed me with a granddaughter who understood what her father had forgotten, that family bonds are built on character, not bank accounts. The hardest lesson: sometimes the people who should love us most are the ones who test our faith the deepest. But if we trust in God's timing and stay true to our values, He'll reveal the truth when it matters most. This true story reminded me that we can't control how others see us, but we can control how we respond when they try to tear us down. These grandpa stories teach us that legacy isn't what we leave behind in our wills, it's the values we pass down through our actions, even when nobody's watching. What family lessons has God taught you through difficult times? Share your own true story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how faith helped you through family challenges. And if this grandpa's story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to remember that love always wins over greed. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories about the power of family, faith, and never giving up on the people we love.